In this video, we're going to set up the waist belt. Okay, let's go ahead and remesh this guy. Let's make sure our attributes are clean from our previous, I think I went through and replaced all these. I did. Okay. So we have designated some hard edges here along the edge. I went and selected some edges. And that is so when I remesh, I can have a hint of what edges I definitely are important to me. I want to keep these. So if I do remesh and I pipe in the hard edges here, you can actually see that we are getting sort of a good mesh value here. I'm not sure I like what I have here as far as remesh values. I kind of want to maybe make it a little bit more fine. It moves around quite a bit, so something like that is actually better. And as always, we follow a remesh node with a poly doctor. Now let's go ahead and move these over so that we can put an attribute transfer node down. And we'll make sure we insert it right after the poly doctor, and we want to pull in attributes from the paint attribute node, not from the null here, but from the paint attribute node. Okay, so let's see. What are we going to need to paint on this one right now? Okay, let's see. I always like to paint a little bit of animation here, so I'm just going to replace mask with animation. Animation. We're just going to paint a little area here in the background in case we need animation. We ended up not needing it, but I'm going to go ahead and paint it anyway, just in case we have some really quick motion and we need to paint in some animation. Be sure and smooth the attribute here a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead. I want to basically clone the setup I have on the other one over here, so I'm literally going to do that. I'm going to take everything here, Alt, click, and drag it over here. We want to keep the same collision object as well, so I'm just going to pipe in this guy here. See what we got as a mesh conform. For this one, maybe we can just try and maybe turn this off, and we'll just do vellum attach for this one. Just use vellum attach on this guy. We'll keep it nice and low. Maybe we'll stick with 10 to the minus 8th, or maybe 10 to the minus 7th. We'll go with 10 to the minus 7th on this one. So we'll stick with that for now. The only reason I kept the attachment, the pin to target on the other one, is to keep it on the shoulder, so instead of sliding off. This one, as long as we keep the attachments here, it should bounce around the waist and be okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy the setup here we have for the other buckle, and we'll alt drag it over, and we will pipe in the results of the buckle here, even though we haven't set them up yet. Maybe we'll walk through this just to make sure everything's good. So as far as attributes go, I am going to stitch this here, so I definitely need an attribute. So we'll go ahead, and I want to have a similar attribute as this one, so I'm just going to copy it. And I'm going to move it over. Let's go ahead and let's start with the belt, since that's what we're on here. We'll start with the belt. We'll add a new attribute, paste in. I'm coming back to record over this. I made a bit of an error. When I went back to rename this attribute waist belt waist buckle stitch, it should have been stitch source, not stitch target. And so I started painting on it, and I provided values. And then I went back and changed the name. And anytime you change the name of an attribute after you've already put attribute values in there, it will basically provide you with a fresh attribute, an empty one. So you'll see here I'm naming it again, and that basically converts everything back to zeros. So that's a big mistake. Later, when I go and try and put the stitch on in a few seconds here, you'll see the effect. Now let's go ahead and merge these in to the merge node, and we'll add another stitch node here. I'm just going to alt drag it out and then put it back in line. Once it's in line again, I'll just go ahead and change the attribute values here. So instead of them being chest belts, they'll be waist belts. Just paste the attribute value in here and then change source to target, TGT. Okay, let's see how that looks. Here you can see I'm quite puzzled as to why this isn't working, and I'm checking the attribute names to make sure everything is working. And at this point, I go back up to the paint attribute node and realize that the values are empty. And at that time, I didn't know why, but only after going back and editing this video did I realize what caused that problem. So we're going to go ahead and paint in some actual values now, and then it'll start to work. Once everything's together, we notice a problem arises here. We can see that the little purple strap is penetrating the pink belt, the pink waist belt. So the way we're going to fix this is to add another soft transform in line right after our current soft transform. And this way the belt won't be penetrating when the sim initializes. So let's go ahead and turn on our reference geometry of our other belts here so we can see everything in context. And then we'll add a soft transform after our existing one. And we will name it soft transform small belt. And we'll pick a single point on that belt, and we'll just pull it out in the Z direction using the ladder until it looks good. And then we might have to adjust the large belt out here because it's penetrating, so we'll pull that one out and adjust its soft radius here to pull him away. So if we look at everything here, nothing should be penetrating at the start. Okay, when you do this, you want to pull out from the center. You don't want to push things in because you're going to cause other problems, because if this belt started by penetrating with the shirt, which was penetrating with the undershirt or the top shirt, then you create a cascading effect. So always kind of pull outward where there's room to breathe. You can always suck it back in with an attach constraint later if you need to. Okay, let's go back down here. Take a look at everything. We've got our second attach point. Okay, I think everything's ready. Now what we have here is a series of pieces of geometry that will collide. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about collision layering before we do the sword belt. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to talk briefly about collision layering, and then we'll do the sword belt. Okay.